being pushed to sort of the extremes. So yeah, perhaps Mr. Johnson trying to return to the centre ground. I mentioned gilt this morning and how they were going to react. Well, we see gilts tumble as expected, sending 10-year yields to the highest since June. So this perhaps also some measure of relief, not just from the general election, but also from the news out of the United States that President Trump signing the US-China trade agreement phase 1. We're expecting more detail, though, about that later today. But certainly gilts tumbling this morning. Look, returning to the idea of what this election now means, Roger, what does it mean for Brexit? Because the whole point of Mr. Johnson calling an early general election, a third vote in 4 years, was this idea of trying to get Brexit done. That was his constant refrain. So what about the timeline?
Well, this is absolutely crucial and will be crucial to markets as well, because the confidence that seems to have come from last night's victory is based on his success on Brexit. The timetable looks like this, as we understand it. There'll be a bit of a cabinet reshuffle, a small one, in the next day or two. A week today, next Friday, is when he will put through the second reading of his Brexit bill. This is the mechanism that takes the UK out of the EU on January the 31st, the one he couldn't get through before. If that happens, and then on January the 31st, the UK does actually Brexit, after that will be the discussions on the trade agreement between the EU and the UK going forward. That's supposed to happen within 11 or 12 months. Frankly, almost anyone you speak to in Europe, but also, to be honest, here in certainly the business community, thinks that is a very tall order. In which case, Boris Johnson then has to think about whether he wants to have an extension, longer time to do it. He said he won't. But the fascinating thing, Caroline, is in this election, he's got probably enough of a majority that he doesn't need the hard Brexiteers in his party to support him, in which case he could potentially take a more liberal view.
Roger, you're staying outside of Parliament there for us all of today, so we'll come back to you with more of your guests later. But I want to bring you up to speed with the markets, which have just opened 4 minutes into trading. The FTSE 250 is up by 2.6%. This, as we see the pound rally 2% on cable. But the FTSE 100, although the futures pointed slightly higher, the FTSE 100 index is actually down by 0.5% this morning. I mean, usually the FTSE 100 moves is inversely correlated basically with the pound. We also have some lines from the EU. So Charles Michel saying that he's congratulating Boris Johnson on the UK victory, but that the EU wants certainty. So that's an interesting line from the EU now. The European Commission President tweeting about the result from the election. Let's go over live now to Brussels, where Maria Tadeo is standing by, because we've just heard from the European Council President. Maria, what is the mood in Brussels, given now that we have the election results?
Good morning. Well, this is day 2 of a summit. Now, you have that first reaction to the actual results being confirmed, and you see, well, two things that are kind of a recurring theme here, which is the head of the European Council, Charles Michel, saying we want a close relationship with the United Kingdom. We welcome this news. We welcome the fact that he has won the election with a majority, and that is something that yesterday night I spoke to a number of officials. They all said, look, this is also good news for the EU, because the one thing that was consistently and constantly missing in this whole negotiation was the UK speaking with one voice. That is to say, the government and the parliament aligned and coming together. Now they have that majority, and they do operate on the basis that the UK, of course, will leave in January with a deal. Now, going forward, and again, just to quote Charles Michel there, he is also saying we want to make sure this is a level playing field for both the EU and the UK, and that is going to be really the center of the conversation going forward, because what is clear, and this is so clear, is that the EU does not want to be undercut by a UK that leaves the European Union and plays by different rules.
Yeah, indeed. And this is going to be, again, the big question. There's only 11 months to negotiate this trade agreement. A lot of doubt about whether that's realistic.
Exactly. To be honest, at this point, when you speak to officials here, they'll tell you the trade deal that we want to get is so big, and it really is so fundamental to our future relationship in so many key strategic areas that we just don't see how you get this done in essentially less than a year. And they do feel that there will be a time in June where the UK will have to make a very politically tricky decision, which is whether they want to extend or not, and whether they feel, once again, they need more time. And Again, the other thing that I'm always constantly told is that the speed of the negotiation, so to speak, will depend on the kind of relationship that Boris Johnson goes for. The more he moves away from the EU standards, the more he tries to divert from the EU rules, but that is going to make it much more complicated.
Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo, thank you so much for joining me live from Brussels, discussing the European perspective on this general election result and the big majority for Boris Johnson and what it means for Brexit. So thank you for your time. I also want to look at the Eurostoxx 600, the big names dominating the top 10 performances with just 8 minutes into trading. They're all basically UK based. So Virgin Money jumping by more than 17%, Persimmon, Centrica, the big utility company, Royal Bank of Scotland. Let's delve into all the stocks to watch then this hour with Bloomberg's Lisa Pham. Very good morning to you. So we do see the FTSE 250 jumping. Wow, we're up 5.1%. Break it down for us.
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing, but it's also worth keeping in mind that domestic stocks have been rocked by the uncertainty surrounding Brexit and the stalemate that's been happening in government and those kinds of things. We've definitely seen that among the home builders and the retailers as well. So this is very good news for them. It's also worth pointing out that the FTSE 350 General Retailers Index, they've done pretty really well today. They're up 6.1%. I mean, it's still trading below the levels of where it was before the Brexit referendum in 2016. But today has seen a very good spike.
Yeah, and the sectors in particular that are doing well are UK banks, actually, and also utilities. That possibly around the idea, that the Labour Party was pushing nationalisation, renationalisation of some big UK industry. So now that possibility goes, then you perhaps see a lift there. Also, the FTSE 100 blue chips this morning, they had dipped at the open, but now we see a bounce higher. So even the FTSE 100 powering higher by 0.8%.
Yeah, so the general idea with the FTSE 100 is that there are some stocks in there that do have a lot of dollar exposure, and so that will be affected by the strength of the pound. But it's also worth keeping in mind that a lot of international investors, they have been staying away from the UK markets because of all this Brexit uncertainty, because we haven't known what's really going on. So today is seen as a positive because money is likely to be flowing back into UK stocks now with valuations being so cheap.
Okay, and talk us through then the nationalisation story that I mentioned.
Yeah, so the utility sector, they have been targeted for nationalisation by the Labour Party, and so the Conservative Party winning by such a big majority removes this risk. So we're seeing companies like Centrica, that's up 10%, Severn Trent is up 8.4%, National Grid is up 8.1%. There are other companies as well that have been at risk of nationalisations. So these are the ones like Postal Services Group Royal Mail. There's also the telecoms operator BT Group and transport firms like First Group and Go Ahead. So the Conservative win today does remove this risk.
Okay, and we also see Lloyds Banking Group up by over 11%. RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland, also gaining 11.1% on that Tory win. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. That's Bloomberg's Lisa Pham. So breaking down all the stocks to watch as we digest the Conservative Party win, Boris Johnson's comments. Let's get all the latest now, though, in global news headlines, because there's not just the general election, of course. There's lots of trade news and other stories. Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans is standing by. Good morning.
Yes, there's other news out there, Caroline, believe it or not. Let's start with the trade deal. President Trump is said to have agreed to a phase 1 trade deal with China. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
Sources say this cancels the introduction of a new round of tariffs that were scheduled for Sunday. U.S. negotiators have offered to cut existing tariff rates by up to 50% on some $360 billion of Chinese imports. In return, Beijing has committed to purchasing large quantities of farm products and to enhance the protection of intellectual property rights. Asian equities bounced and the yuan rose the most in a year. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Crossing over to Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel may be facing down a revolt from lawmakers over her China policy. That's according to draft legislation seen by Bloomberg News. Bloomberg's Patrick Donahue explains.
Bundestag legislators are pushing for restrictions that could effectively ban equipment supplier Huawei from Germany's new 5G networks. That's a serious challenge to Merkel's decision this year not to impose an overall ban on individual vendors. A ban in Germany could shift the debate over Huawei in Europe, where governments have tried to strike a balance between security and trade relations. In Berlin, Patrick Donahue, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
6 bodies have been recovered from New Zealand's White Island 4 days after tourists were engulfed in a volcanic eruption. 2 more victims are thought to still be on the island, but have yet to be found, and another operation will be launched to find them. The recovery operation was delayed due to fears of another eruption. Scientists warn that volcanic activity has increased and the island is highly volatile. And EU leaders have pledged to eliminate net carbon emissions by the middle of the century. It's a historic pledge that sets up a radical overhaul of the continent's economy. 26 nations gave an unqualified endorsement of the goal. Poland fudged slightly, endorsing the objective, but actually not committing to meet it. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne. We're going to go live to Downing Street. Bloomberg's Neera Chehich is there for all the latest on the general election. This is the US stock 600 surpasses a record on the trade deal and the UK vote. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology, data with inspiration, investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors Incorporated.
3, 2, 1. Oh no. Which button am I?
When every second counts, you can't wing it.
Guys, a little help up here?
In a home fire, you may have less than 2 minutes to get out. So make a family home fire escape plan. Then practice home fire drills at least twice a year so everyone knows what to do when they hear. Prepare your family at ready.gov/fire drill. Brought to you by FEMA, the Ad Council, and Make Safe Happen.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
President Trump is saying to have signed off the so-called Phase 1 trade deal. That's according to sources telling Bloomberg. But perhaps this is also avoiding the threat of new tariffs on Sunday. Joining us now is U.S. Chamber of Commerce Executive Vice President Myron Brilliant out of Washington, D.C. Myron, great to have you back. So what does this mean if we get the trade deal? And how important is it that the existing tariffs are also rolled back and not just avoiding the new tariffs on Sunday?
Look, we need a shot in the arm. We've had a big week on the trade front, real momentum with the USMCA moving forward. Hopefully we'll get a vote in the House next week. But with the China uncertainty hanging over the economy, hanging over, frankly, the global economy, the fact that we're looking likely we're going to have a deal imminently, I think the deal could be signed soon. They're talking about the final touches as we speak. And I'm confident that the deal will be a movement in the right direction when it comes to removing some of the tariffs. It's much more than just suspending the tariffs that would have gone into effect December 15th. I think there will be a rollback on tariffs that are already in place. That's a good news for the American business community, for farmers, for consumers. But there's still more work ahead.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash with the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin. Let's get over there to Richard Jones. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Asian equities have risen sharply across the board, with sentiment being lifted by relief over a probable Phase 1 China-US trade deal being agreed. The Nikkei 225 is up by 2.6%, the Hang Seng up 2.4%, Shanghai Composite up 1.8%, and the Kospi up 1.5%. U.S. equity futures are also higher, adding to yesterday's gains, with E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures up by 4 and 0.5%, respectively. European equities have had a strong open, with the Euro Stoxx 50, DAX, CAC 40 all trading 1.2% higher. The FTSE 100 is up about 0.9%, lagging other European bourses slightly after a strong rally in the pound overnight. The more domestically focused FTSE 250 is at a record high, up 4.2%. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is trading 1 basis point higher at 1.9% after jumping 10 basis points yesterday. The 10-year German bond yield is 3 basis points higher at minus 0.24%, with the 10-year gilt yield up 5 basis points to 0.87%. In the FX space, the standout is the pound, with sterling trading just under 2% higher versus both the dollar and the euro. The Bloomberg Dollar Index is lower by 0.3%, falling for the fourth day in 5 this week. Looking ahead to data, a fairly quiet calendar today. We get Italian industrial sales and orders for October, and in central bank speakers in Europe today, we get the ECB's Valois, Holtzman, and the Guindos. That's it for me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg terminal. Caroline?
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. ECB President Christine Lagarde has struck a positive note in a central bank debut. She says the euro area economy's slowdown is showing signs of bottoming out. We've learned some policymakers wanted Lagarde to mention the risks of sub-zero rates, but the Governing Council decided the message might be overinterpreted by investors. In the US, the House Judiciary Committee is plowing ahead with articles of impeachment against President Trump. That's despite objections and amendments from Republican members of the panel. Yesterday, after hours of heated debate, the committee's chairman delayed the final votes until today. And Myanmar's leader has asked the UN's top court to drop a genocide case against her country. Aung San Suu Kyi says a military justice system in Myanmar needs to be given a chance to actually work. She was speaking on the final day of hearings in The Hague about a brutal campaign against Rohingya Muslims in 2017. The court hasn't said when it'll issue its ruling. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
The UK decides Brexit and beyond, here on Daybreak Europe.
Now, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has won a decisive victory in the UK election, this putting the country on course to leave the European Union next month. Johnson's projected majority would give him more power, actually, to get his own way on the Brexit deal, especially if he needs extra time to negotiate with the EU on the trade deal. Joining us now with more insights is our Daybreak Europe anchor, Naira Chahich, live from Downing Street. Very good morning to you, Naira. So Boris Johnson gets the keys once again to number 10.
Exactly. Good morning, Caroline. And we heard from the Prime Minister earlier this morning, just about an hour ago or so, where he delivered really quite a soundbite line where he said, before we get Brexit done, let's get breakfast done. And it was a rather victorious speech that we heard from the Prime Minister, and perhaps rightly so, because the party, the Conservative Party, winning 365 seats out of 650 so far as we stand. There's 2 more seats left to count. So it's really a resounding majority, the best result for the Conservatives, in fact, since Margaret Thatcher in 1987. And what it does is now allow Boris Johnson, as he said, to get Brexit done, to deliver the Brexit deal that he's been looking for. The question, though, is what that exactly will look like as we head into 2020.
And Naira, what I thought was really interesting from Boris was this sense of trying to bring in people who weren't necessarily Tory voters normally, but as he said, lent him their votes. A sense of perhaps trying to widen, even move the Tory party in more to the middle ground.
Exactly. You've picked up on a really key point, Roger. He talked about one nation Conservatives. It wasn't entirely clear exactly what that meant, but we can presume maybe that it is about uniting different parts of the country, both economically But also, as you say, what was really stunning and historic about this election is that there were parts of the UK that voted Conservative for the first time. So what really made the difference for the Conservatives and helped them get that majority was that they really won a lot of seats in those Labour heartlands in Northern England, but also in Wales. And that's really what Boris Johnson was referring to. I suppose you could say he showed a touch of humility in saying that there was work to be done to really get those parts of the UK on side and make them, I suppose, feel reassured for voting for the Conservatives for the first time.
Yeah, indeed. Of course, after, what has been, 9 or so years of austerity, it does seem to be that we may be heading in a new direction. I note also that Charles Michel, the European Council President, congratulating Mr. Johnson, saying that the EU is ready for the next phase. So it's going to be all about this negotiation around the trade deal. Can it really be done in 11 months?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Caroline. And I mean, in terms of congratulations, of course, we also heard from President Trump very early this morning congratulating Boris Johnson on the majority and saying that a deal can be done with the US now. In terms of the EU, so the resounding majority that Boris Johnson has got, one argument that you could make is that this will allow him to pursue perhaps a little bit of a softer Brexit than some of the hardliners, the ERG, in his party. And the question still remains as to what kind of relationship the UK is going to have with the EU at the end of all this. Are we going to look to a sort of a Singapore model of a kind of regulatory light UK, or is the UK actually going to stay quite closely tied to the EU and have to adhere to a lot of standards that are currently in place? So that's one question. And in terms of the timing, Caroline, yes. So what we've heard from Boris Johnson in the past, that he's not necessarily going to be looking to extend the negotiations beyond the deadline that we're looking at the end of 2020. July is the date when we could look for that to be reassessed. But yes, the risk for the market out there is that we do still head to the end of 2020 and perhaps face another cliff edge scenario. The other potential risk for the markets out there right now, of course, is we have to think about the results that we saw from the Scottish National Party, but also the results in Northern Ireland, because both of those point to risks about questions over the unity of the United Kingdom.
Nera Chehich, thank you so much for joining us live outside of Downing Street, Daybreak Europe anchor. And Roger, you've got more from outside of Parliament.
Indeed, straight ahead, Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce, Adam Marshall, will be joining us from the Green to discuss some of the implications for business. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Wall Street begins the day with the S&P and NASDAQ at all-time highs. Word of a Phase 1 trade deal with China drove the market higher yesterday. It means that a new round of tariffs on Chinese imports, due to take effect Sunday, will not kick in. Yesterday's rally left Boeing behind with its 737 MAX still stuck on the tarmac. American Airlines now says it doesn't expect a return to service for the MAX before April. Southwest has also hinted at additional delays in getting its 737 MAX fleet back in the air. Online shoppers are getting fewer discounts on toys this holiday season. A UBS analyst says average discounts on Cyber Monday ranged between 15 and 18% this year, down from 31% last year. Toys remain a top gift category. The National Retail Federation says 33% of Thanksgiving weekend shoppers said they were buying toys as gifts, about the same as last year. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Hello, I'm here to tell you that age really does bring wisdom, and you may still have plenty to contribute. At Eisner Amper, we're successful at helping business owners and entrepreneurs assess and plan for the future, as well as maximize where you are in the present. If you're curious about how to plan for both your professional and personal future, come and talk to us. I'm Lisa Stewart, Principal in charge of the Center for Family Business Excellence, and I'd love to help you to find the right path forward. You can find us at eisneramper.com/family.
Imagine Christmas, a time for celebrating, unwrapping, and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
This week at Tesco, whole beef roasting joints and whole legs of lamb are half price. That's a whole lot of halves off a whole lot of wholes. What a mouthful. Tesco, delivering Christmas for 100 years. Max 2 per customer, selected stores, excludes Express, ends 31st of December.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Far wing, elevates, triple bucket.
The war of the crowd. The shot clock ticks down. Will the ball go in? The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. And the replays just don't cut
The
it.
sideline, the Van Fleet for three.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season streaming live, so you can be there when it matters most. Hear it now, hear it live on TuneIn.
Fake in the lane, turnaround jumper from 8 feet is good on the
Search
right block.
NBA today to start listening.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC,
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium,
CNBC, and Fox News Talk,
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
you can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
This One Nation Conservative government has been given a powerful new mandate to get Brexit done.
I do believe that the pressure is off Boris to actually, get that deal done by 2020.
I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection on this result and on the policies that the party will take going forward.
Very few things are better for a currency than certainty. Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, live from Westminster on Bloomberg Radio.
And it's 8:30 a.m. here in London. A warm welcome to the programme. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Roger Hearing down at Westminster, where we're taking on board a huge change in the British political landscape.
363 seats won by the Conservatives out of 650, it would seem. So a gain of at least 47 seats for the Tories. This, Roger, has led to a surge in the pound, although that gain is fading just a little. We're up by 1.8% at the moment on cable, spot 3406. Against the euro, we're at spot 8335, so also up by 1.5%. It's worth also looking more broadly, though, in terms of yields to understand the story around this. So UK benchmark yields up by 4 basis points at spot 86. German Bund yields negative 24. US yields at 1.89%. So at least we have some certainty. I think that is basically the reaction of the markets. Also, small cap stocks and domestic stocks here in the UK saw we're up by 4% on the FTSE 250. The FTSE 100 also up by 1%. More broadly, though, there is another story in the markets, which is the US, President Donald Trump signing off on a phase 1 trade deal with China. We're expecting more news on that, Washington time, so later today on Friday. So that has helped the power equities higher, so also helping the US stock 600 up 1.4% this morning. And then US futures higher this morning after we saw a record close yesterday for the S&P 500. So we're up by 0.4%, and the Dow Jones futures also higher 0.4% this hour. But look, let's talk through the story, Roger, about this, what is a landslide victory for the Conservatives. Bloomberg Intelligence's Tom Craighead saying that the implications of this Tory victory basically mean that the FTSE and UK stocks are investable once again.
Yeah, it's an interesting point in terms of what the UK looks like this morning, both politically and economically. And on the political sphere, interestingly, moving into Europe, we're getting some signs of the people inside Europe who will have to deal with Boris Johnson and work with him on Brexit, taking certainly a conciliatory line. Mark Rutte of the Dutch saying they look forward to constructive cooperation with Johnson. The Irish Europe Minister says we now have UK certainty to move ahead. I think this morning, despite the lack of sunshine down here at Westminster, there's certainly a bit of sunshine coming from Brussels trying to shine on what's going on. But of course the key to all this is how business reacts and what business has to do to deal with it. And I'm very pleased to say down with me here in Westminster is Adam Marshall, who's Director General at the British Chambers of Commerce. Adam, welcome, good morning. Thank you for being with us on these somewhat unpleasant weather conditions. We fully appreciate it. Let me ask you, people you deal with this morning, are they waking up and saying, yes, this is the beginning of something that will actually take us out of a very difficult period?
Well, I think after 3 years of stasis, Roger, businesses will be pleased that there is a governing majority in Parliament. They will want to see swift movement, though, away from campaign slogans and towards the detail that really matters to them. For quite a long time now, we've been hearing some 30,000-foot pronouncements from those who wish to lead this country. We now need to see them really get stuck in, whether that's on Brexit or on some of the issues of how you build the UK economy for the future. We have to get to the nitty-gritty now.
Okay, so the nitty-gritty is needed, but I suppose there is significant relief, certainly amongst investors in, for example, the energy companies in the UK, that a Labour victory, a hung Parliament is obviously, a distant memory. So we see those stocks rise because the idea of renationalisation, for example, is off the table. So it's, it really is a resounding success for the Tory party, but obviously they've not said enough yet in terms of what Brexit is actually going to look like, and there's only 11 months to negotiate a trade agreement. What does Boris Johnson need to do to satisfy business now?
Well, it is a really tight timetable, and our priority in business has always been to ensure that we get the right outcome to these negotiations rather than simply get them done quickly. And I think emphasis has to shift to that in the days ahead. Here in the UK, too, we want to see a shift on the domestic economy. Yes, businesses will be very relieved that they're not going to be talking about massive state intervention, nationalisation, significantly higher tax rates than they were facing before. But there is still an economy which we project will grow at just 1% next year and cap off the lowest decade of growth that we've seen in quite a long time. And we've got to see action to do something about that, whether that's on infrastructure, whether it's on lowering the cost of doing business, or so much more besides.
Well, Adam, let me pick up on that, because you mentioned infrastructure there, I think, and one of the big things that Boris Johnson did during the election campaign was talk about public spending. A lot of public spending, not quite on the scale of Labour, admittedly, but a lot. And even this morning, in his speech this morning, just an hour or so ago, acknowledging his victory, he talked about more nurses, more hospitals, these kind of things. I mean, that's going to help in one sense, in that there's more business for your members.
Well, certainly increases in government spending do help business around the country. But they could be a sugar hit or they could be a protein boost. Both of those are possible. What we don't want to see is the sugar hit, where it comes really quickly but the effects don't last particularly long. When you build infrastructure, when you build broadband connectivity, when you do things that have a 30 to 50 year lifespan, you really contribute to the economy over the long term. You give it that protein boost it really needs. And I think a lot of business people will be looking to see that. There have been clouds over some of the major infrastructure projects that business has supported for a long time. time. Airport expansion at Heathrow, for example, the high-speed 2 rail link, which is an important new backbone for the UK. We want to see that uncertainty dispelled and those things moving forward because they create big supply chains, investment opportunities, and give real confidence to business.
Do you really believe that this Conservative government is going to deliver on any of those? The productivity problem for the UK is long running. Was there anything in the Tory party manifesto that convinces you that this leadership is going to deliver on that, on infrastructure? I mean, airport expansion has been one of the things that, that Mr. Johnson has been very involved with, and it still has not happened.
Well, one of my jobs now is, of course, to hold their feet to the fire, and we will be doing that over the next few weeks. But the reason why we're placing so much emphasis now on detail is because those manifesto commitments from the winning party were very thin. We had 60 pages. We did not have the kind of detail that lets you say, I know exactly what their policy is, how they're going to deliver it, and what it means for business. That's what I'm after now.
All right, Adam, thank you so much for being with us. Adam Marshall there of the British Chambers of Commerce, giving us a business view of what's been going on overnight that has changed the political landscape so dramatically. Caroline.
Roger, thank you so much. We'll be back to you in a moment, but let's get all the latest now in global news headlines. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. The US and China have a Phase 1 trade deal. President Trump signed off on the pact, cancelling a new round of tariffs. Washington has also offered to cut existing tariffs by up to 50%. That's as in return for Beijing making large farm purchases and beefing up intellectual property protection. The terms of the deal have been agreed, but the text hasn't been finalized. Staying in the US, the House Judiciary Committee is plowing ahead with articles of impeachment against President Trump. That's despite objections and amendments from Republican members of the panel. Yesterday, after hours of heated debate, the committee's chairman delayed the final votes until today. Now to New Zealand. The military has retrieved 6 bodies from the offshore volcano that erupted early this week, even as scientists warned of another eruption. Bloomberg's Matthew Brockett reports.
The operation to retrieve bodies from White Island was conducted by members of the bomb disposal squad wearing specialist clothing and breathing equipment. 2 further bodies thought to still be on the island remain to be found. There were 47 people on the volcano when it erupted Monday in an explosion of scorching steam, gas and ash. Most sustained severe burns. 16 have died in Wellington. Matthew Brockett, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And crossing over to Europe, EU leaders have agreed to work towards climate neutrality by 2050, but they've left Poland out of the commitment. That's for now. Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo has all those details.
In a classic European fudge, EU leaders agreed to eliminate net carbon emissions by 2050, but they could not all agree on the timeline to implement it, with one member state, Poland, saying it endorses a plan known as the European Green Deal, but is not fully ready to commit to the target. In Brussels, Maria Tadeo, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Tech by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans. Now coming up next on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Lucy McDonald, CIO of Global Equities at Allianz Global Investors, will be joining us live from Westminster, where we can discuss what the general election victory for the Tory party and their significant majority in Parliament is going to mean for the future of Brexit and for markets here in the UK. More widely, the US Stoxx 600 gains 1.5% right now. This on the tailwind both of general election certainty here in the UK, but also of President Donald Trump bringing in that Phase 1 deal with China. We're expecting more details on that later today. The FTSE 100 meanwhile surges 1.3%. The pound gains almost 2%, trading at 1.3417 this morning. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe live from London. This is Bloomberg.
I'm a 40-year-old man that walked in there to get his high school diploma. It was very hard for me, but Miss Araceli, she gave me direction.
At age 47, Marco finished his high school diploma.
50% of getting your high school diploma is walking through those doors. The other 50% is doing the work.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the Chief Revenue Officer of the New York Mets, this means overseeing complex operations, key financial drivers, and interpreting data to make critical decisions every day.
How is your business managing complexity? CohnReznick can help you improve performance through an integrated business planning strategy that optimizes your data, streamlines processes, and keeps you ahead of the competition. Explore more at CohnReznick.com/MLB. CohnReznick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at Bevel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Ah, Christmas, a time for sharing gifts and laughter, and photos and videos. Make the most of it with a SIM-only deal packed with data from Tesco Mobile. Like a 10-gig SIM for just £13 a month. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile today. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 29th of December. 12-month contract and unlocked 4G-enabled phone required. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
My name's Ian, and I run the Christmas Centres for Crisis. Many people in Britain are homeless, stuck in hostels, sleeping on floors, even on the street. You can change this. Our Christmas Centres provide people with food, safety and support, and show them how Crisis can help them find a home and a job in the year ahead. You can reserve a place at Crisis this Christmas for just £28.87. Go to crisis.org.uk now. Help someone take their first step out of homelessness this Christmas. Thank you.
At TUI, we can help you find the perfect getaway for two. We fly to over 70 destinations worldwide, so wherever you have in mind, we'll help you get there. Book now and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. Book online or in store with one of our travel experts. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's and put you in the middle. Offer available on selected holidays for a limited time and subject to availability. Booking T's and C's apply. At or protected.
Ah, Christmas, a time for celebrating, unwrapping and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Cutting for the net. Scores! On the goal line. Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three, it's up and in!
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So the Conservatives look set to win 365 out of 650 seats in the House of Commons. A thumping victory, Labour's Corbyn saying that he will not fight another general election. The pound surges the most in 2 years after that news. The pound currently up by 1.9% at 1.34. The FTSE 250 sees the biggest gain since 1986, jumping as much as 5.4%. A relief rally, including the house builders, for example, the banks and utilities and retailers. Yields also climbing as uncertainty fades around Brexit here in the UK. But there's also another big story in the markets. President Donald Trump signing off on a Phase 1 trade deal with China. So the US stock 600 powers ahead, up by 1.6%. We also see US futures higher this morning. Currently, futures are up by 0.4% on the Dow Jones. We saw the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq record closes on Thursday. That is up by 0.9%, for example, on the S&P 500. 10-year Treasury yields in the United States of America currently trading at 1.89%. German Bund yields at negative 24 basis points. And just in currencies, again on the trade news, the Japanese yen retreats 0.25% at 109.6. So 2 big stories for the markets. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Goins with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Hong Kong police officers have racked up more than $120 million in overtime wages. That's as they work weekends and long hours to handle unprecedented pro-democracy protests. Roughly 11,000 officers were paid more than $122 million for extra shifts between June and November. That's according to a document posted on Facebook. ECB President Christine Lagarde struck a positive note in her central bank debut. She says the euro area economy's slowdown is showing signs of now bottoming out. We've learned some policymakers wanted Lagarde to mention the risks of sub-zero rates, but the Governing Council decided the message might be over-interpreted, and that was by investors. And finally, after a general election and upcoming Christmas shopping, we might all need one of these. The back-cracking traditional Thai massage has now been added to a prestigious UNESCO heritage list. As part of the list, the massage will now be recognized as something to be preserved for future generations. And like conventional massages, Thai massages involve a lot of movement and typically sees people doing a series of different positions. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Goins. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much. Leanne Goins there with the World News Roundup. Now, my co-host Roger Hearing is live outside of Parliament as we digest the election result this morning. The UK really waking up to a brand new start, 5 more years potentially of Conservative rule. Good morning, Roger.
Yes, good morning from very chilly and very damp and indeed very muddy Westminster, where we are just opposite the Houses of Parliament, where everyone is digesting the results of what has been really a seismic change in UK politics brought about by the events of last night. And of course, not just in UK politics, but potentially in the UK economy because of the consequences of that. And to talk about that and indeed the wider issues in the current trade disputes, of course, between China and the US and where that may go too, I'm very pleased to be joined down here by Lucy McDonald, CIO of Global Equities at Allianz Global Investors. Lucy, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for persevering through the horrible conditions to be here with us. Well, let me pick pick up on what happened last night, because it seems that now we do have at least an element of certainty about the way forward, at least for the next few months, if nothing else, and that should help the UK economy.
Certainly. The two tail risks which have been bothering investors over the last few years, as far as the UK is concerned, have been taken off the table for now. So one taken off permanently, we think, that being sort of the threat of an extreme left-wing government, and then the second of a hard Brexit, not completely off the table, but certainly diminished probability. So from that perspective, you get more certainty, and although the result is not a complete surprise, it had been priced in gradually, it is still, just to see it is good news.
Okay, so it is more certainty. Just to remind our listeners, of course, you've got $3.5 billion pounds of assets under management in your global equity fund. So I'm interested to see and to hear, how this result factors in to your thinking when it comes to investing. Does it make the UK more investable, or do we still have the uncertainty of Brexit that weighs on your thinking? Are there better places to put your money?
Oh, it certainly makes it more investable, and it's been moving that way over the last few months. As I've said, these two risks have been priced out. The discounts associated with them have been diminishing. So certainty is what markets like, what investors like, and we've got more of that today.
And would you say that UK equities are perhaps key in that, because we've seen the FTSE huge rises in response to this? Surprisingly, really, obviously given what's happened with sterling as well. Normally they don't move in lockstep like that, but they've been vastly underbought recently. Is it a place to go?
Yes, I mean, some of those underweight positions have been closed up over the last few months. It's not surprising that the larger stocks would also be rising, because that's where passive money would go first. But the big rises clearly are in the mid cap and the more domestic related, where you've seen the biggest discounts.
Where do you see the Bank of England going now with this? The B of E, Threadneedle Street, very much sort of taking a back seat during the election campaign, and indeed, quite wary given the uncertainty around Brexit. But what does it mean for Mark Carney, for his team? Will we see an interest rate cut in 2020?
Well, we've got a new governor to be appointed now, haven't we?
Yeah.
So what will they do? I mean, who will it be? Probably it's going to be neutral to pro-Brexit, whoever it happens to be. And as far as the economy is concerned, it needs more support. It will get a boost from some of the fiscal spending that's been promised, but also, more importantly, it might get a bit more of a boost from confidence coming back into business spending, which has just ground to a halt over the last few months.
And what about sterling? Because there's an issue here that to get the gains that we need to have in the UK economy to take advantage of what is going to be a difficult year, inevitably, a strong pound isn't necessarily going to help, is it?
It doesn't help, but how far this sterling will rise after this initial bounce, I think is more questionable. And it's only really getting back to levels where it was perfectly manageable before. So I can't see it being a real barrier to growth.
Lucy, how do you interpret the trade negotiations? I mean, a lot of people say that it's not possible to do it in 11 months, that other comparable deals have just taken years to do. Do you think that Mr. Johnson is likely then to ask for an extension? How do you see that playing out? And will that also bother investors as much as the past uncertainty has done?
More likely than not, he will ask for an extension, but I think he will not immediately. So we'll probably by about halfway through the year get a better idea about that. But it wouldn't be surprising, and now he's in a better position to be able to ask for it.
Because he has a large majority, which means he doesn't have to necessarily tangle with the harder Brexiteers.
Exactly that.
Let's pick up on the other, obviously very, very big story in the global economy, which is what we're hearing from Washington about the possibility of this phase one trade deal going through with China. I mean, we've traded on up when it was up and down when it was down. We've ridden with this. Is the market still getting too excited when the ink isn't actually on the paper yet, as far as we know?
It is a double gift from Santa, isn't it? I mean, this is certainly what has been rumoured over the last few days, and it looks like we are going to get some more news about it today, because we're right against the deadline for the December load of tariffs. So good news in the short term, but not the end of this being a particular dispute. we still think, we're going to have an extended period where there's going to be disagreement about intellectual property, about the state support of industries, and cyber interference. So, all of that is going to stay in the background. But at least if there is some short-term agreement and putting a little bit of a lid on future tariffs, then that will be greeted well. And again, rather like in the UK, it's a question of the business confidence because spending corporate spending has slowed down in the US as well.
Yeah, indeed. President Trump tweeting that the US and China are, quote, very close to signing a big trade deal. So we did see what global stocks hit a record high for the first time since early 2018. As you look towards the end of the year and into next year, how risk on are you going to be next year, given that we are late cycle?
Well, we've had a very, very strong year from returns, and actually even stronger than we anticipated. And most of that has been driven by the policy from central banks, and particularly the Fed. As we now stand, we are probably on hold for the Fed and the ECB for the foreseeable future, so you're not going to get that boost.
All right. Thanks very much indeed for being with us here down at Westminster. Lucy McDonald, their CIO of Global Equities at Allianz Global Investors, talking about both the international trade aspects and, of course, also what's happening here in the UK overnight and the impact it will have. Caroline.
Roger, thank you so much. Lucy McDonald, really fascinating. So a couple of big issues off the agenda, a couple of uncertainties for the markets disappear. A double gift from Santa, as Lucy McDonald put it. Now, coming up next, more on Boris Johnson's decisive victory, what it means for Brexit and the next steps. We are live from Westminster. We will also be speaking to Ian Lavery, who is the Labour Party chairman, and the Conservative MP Tobias Elwood. That's coming up next. This is Bloomberg.
Portfolio analyst. This week at Tesco, whole beef roasting joints and whole legs of lamb are half price. That's a whole lot of halves off a whole lot of wholes. What a mouthful. Tesco, delivering Christmas for 100 years. Max 2 per customer, selected stores, excludes Express, ends 31st of December.
Hey, tune in listeners, Steve Kornacki here from NBC News. I want to tell you about a podcast I'm hosting called Article 2, Inside Impeachment. It's dedicated to bringing you the latest developments on the impeachment inquiry into President Trump. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I talk to NBC News reporters who are closest to the story to break down what's new, what matters, and what it means for the 2020 election. Search and favorite Article 2, Inside Impeachment on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and flows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
This one nation conservative government has been given a powerful new mandate to get Brexit done.
I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection on this result and on the policies that the party will take going forward.
I do believe that the pressure is off Boris to actually, get that deal done by 2020.
For millions of people in our country, these results will bring dread and dismay, and people are looking for hope.
This majority allows him to go either way, and the bigger the majority, the more he will be able to determine his own position.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, live from Westminster on Bloomberg Radio.
A very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And a very good morning from Westminster. I'm Roger Hearing, observing what is happening here as a result of the amazing events really overnight that have overturned many decades of political action here in the UK, not least the very, very bad night for the Labour Party and a very, 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 very good one for Boris Johnson.
Indeed, Britain wakes up to a solidly Conservative government, so the gamble of an early election is paid off for Boris Johnson. Jeremy Corbyn says he won't lead the Labour Party into a future election. The Lib Dem leader Joe Swinson resigns, and in the markets, Roger, the reaction to that thumping majority for Mr Johnson is a surge in sterling, up by 1.8% currently on the spot price, 1.34 exactly. We also see surging FTSE 100 and FTSE 250 shares. So on the 250, the more domestically focused market, we are up by 4.2% right now. The US stock 600 also gaining by 1.6% this morning. It's not just about the UK election, Roger. It is also about President Donald Trump signing off on this phase 1 trade deal with China. We're expecting to hear more lines from that when Washington wakes up this Friday. The MSCI All Country World Index hitting an all-time high on the trade progress. So we're up 0.7% on the All Country World Index right now. In terms of futures for the US market, we are higher for those too. We gain 0.4% for Dow Jones futures. The S&P 500 closed higher 0.9%. So the S&P 500 and NASDAQ at record closes yesterday. In terms of the fixed income markets, we did see a reaction to the trade story and the UK general election result there too. 1.88% for US benchmark yields, down a basis point. German yields at negative 24 basis points, so gaining 2 basis points. And in terms of UK gilt yields, we're higher 3.5 basis points at spot 0.85%. The only other thing really to mention is the Japanese yen, weaker 0.25%, trading above 109, so 109.61 this morning, again in reaction to the trade story. So those are the markets right now. Roger, what did you make then of last night? We saw, a significant majority for the Conservative Party now. What did you make of the win?
Well, let's first of all bring you up to speed with the number, because I think it is important in the end to know what they are. Basically, Boris Johnson ends up with a 76 majority. The Conservatives, with I think only a couple of seats more to announce, have got 364. Labour, 203. Now, they haven't been that low, listen to this, since 1935. We're talking Ramsay MacDonald, we're talking people from a long, long way distant in the past. And it's been an extraordinary turnaround. And the big, big takeaway, of course, is Boris Johnson has the means now to push through his Brexit deal.
Your hand.
I think what we're going to hear now, actually, well, let's hear from Boris Johnson, because he was speaking about what would happen in terms of the people who supported him, normally Labour supporters, who have decided this time not to. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Your hand may have quivered over the ballot paper as before you put your cross in the Conservative box. And you may intend to return to Labour next time round. And if that is the case, I am humbled that you have put your trust in me and that you have put your trust in us.
So Boris Johnson there speaking just earlier this morning. You and I were discussing this. It seems like the Conservative leader sort of tacking back to the centre ground. He was pretty gracious in the speech, commiserating for the Tories who had lost their seats despite the huge win, and also thanking people, for their vote. But fundamentally, Roger, what does it mean for Brexit? Because that's why the Prime Minister called this early general election. So what does it mean for the timeline?
Well, what it means is that the timeline is very tight. Let's not forget that, because all this leads on theoretically onto trade talks over the next 11 months. Without an extension, Boris Johnson has said he won't ask for one. So that is extremely tight. Many in the EU are saying can't be done. But the point is, immediately, a week today, the second reading of the Brexit bill will be put into the buildings just in front of me here, and almost certainly will go through. So that is absolutely key.
Yeah, indeed. We've already had reaction from the European Union saying that they are congratulating Boris Johnson, but also wanting to find out what happens next to get on with Brexit, as it were. And then Carolyn Fairbairn of the CBI welcoming also Boris Johnson, but wanting more details for business, and HSBC saying that the Bank of England could well cut interest rates now by May 2020 by 25 basis points. So that's sort of some of the reaction that we're just getting this morning, Roger.
Well, let's now focus on the Labour Party, which was, I'm afraid, the big loser of the night. I'm very pleased to say, joining us on the line, Ian Lavery, the Labour Party chairman. Thanks very much for joining us, Mr. Lavery. Good morning to you, and perhaps congratulations. You were one of the few, you certainly had many colleagues who didn't win their seats, but congratulations to you for winning yours. Can I just ask you, what happens next with the Labour Party? When will Jeremy Corbyn be replaced?
Well, we've got we are a democratic, grassroots-led party, and what we will do is we'll sit down over the coming days and we'll discuss what happened in the election. We'll have a full post-mortem on what happened, and we'll come up with a package of measures of taking the party forward, and we will be doing that with all due haste.
Well, haste is clearly what you need. I mean, let's be realistic about this. The truth, which I've heard from numerous Labour Party supporters and candidates across the country, was that your leader was toxic on the doorsteps. It was a Corbyn problem. Do you undertake to accept that now?
Well, I'm not accepting that. Of course I'm not accepting it, because I think Jeremy Corbyn is a leader who only his leadership since 1945. I'll tell you what the problem's been here. It's been Brexit. The problem in the communities where we've lost seat has been Brexit, because if you have a look, in 2017, when we promised in the manifesto, that fantastic manifesto, we promised that we would leave and we would respect the vote of the referendum in 2016. We had a great manifesto in 2017. We had a leader called Jeremy Corbyn. Only 2 years later, we've got a leader in Jeremy Corbyn. We've got a fantastic manifesto, but we've changed our stance on Brexit. We said we would now negotiate a deal and have a second referendum. We would put it back to the people. And to be fair, people in these communities feel as if we haven't listened to them. They feel as if the Labour Party has ignored their voice, and the reality is 17.4 million voted to leave the EU, and we haven't left yet. And they see the Labour Party is a Remain party, and they see the Labour Party is a party that's frustrated attempts to leave the EU.
Ian Lavery, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us there, Ian Lavery, chairman of the Labour Party, saying there that Brexit was the core of what was the problem for Labour in this election, and saying that Jeremy Corbyn was not, but also telling us there that there will be a process now to find out what happens next. Caroline.
Very interesting, because of course the Liberal Democrat leader Jo Swinson, who also did not get the number of seats that she wanted, has resigned. So no doubt there'll be pressure on the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. So also joining me this morning is Charles Hecker, who is senior partner and political expert at Control Risk. So warm welcome to you in the London radio studio. Charles, what did you make then of the Tory party win? I mean, a lot of people have been saying in the run-up to the vote on Thursday that the polls were narrowing, but now it's an absolute landslide for Johnson.
Yeah, it's a thumping victory for the Conservatives this morning, and I think that Roger's commentary and some of the news that you're reading from Westminster right now is indicative of this sigh of relief from the business community, and you're finally starting to see companies and government organizations make policy announcements and talk about the future. I mean, what the election has delivered is increased political stability for the UK. If you think of what the alternatives were, and that is a hung parliament, either with a small gap or with a large gap for the Conservatives, the potential of a second referendum, the potential of another election. There is finally clarity on what's going to happen going forward for the time being. We know now that the United Kingdom will leave the European Union on January 31st. There's very, very little doubt about that. I guess the big question is, how does the transition period play out?
Because that's the key point, isn't it, Charles? I mean, we've heard again and again from numerous people that this 11 months that they've got to talk about trade with the EU to set up that new relationship is not going to be enough. And as we sit, Boris Johnson is committed not to having an extension. So this time next year, we could have all this all over again.
Yeah, it's a really tough one, that, because nobody really genuinely believes that the UK is going to be able to conclude a trade agreement with the EU in the space of 11 months. I mean, that's just not realistic. Moreover, the Prime Minister has to declare whether he wants an extension or not in June. And he said that he doesn't want an extension, but he also said he didn't want an election. So we're going to have to see how he plays that out.
Indeed. Look, just a couple of lines that have caught my eye. So Germany's main industry lobby, the BDI, saying that the nation's companies are breathing a sigh of relief, as you were saying, Charles, even if they didn't want Brexit, because at least there is, quote, a clear course for Johnson. The political fog in London is clearing. We've also been hearing from the Tory party chairman, James Cleverly, who's been speaking on Bloomberg Television, saying that this delivers certainty for the market. But my question to you is, does the old image of the Tory party as sort of the safe bet when it comes to the economy, does that old view still hold today?
Businesses will have their political preferences. And I think there was probably greater political instability in the forecast under a Labour government. I mean, you heard about the claims of nationalization, wanting to nationalize utilities, wanting to nationalize telecoms, wanting to nationalize, take public businesses that have been run by the private sector. I think that business will heave another sigh of relief that agenda has not won the day. Beyond that, I think what business wants more than anything else really is predictability. Business needs to be able to plan, and they haven't been able to do that for years, really. And no matter who won, now they know who's in, and they know what the future looks like. So I think that's probably an advantage no matter what the stripe.
But, Charles, at the same time, this is a government that, in order to get into power, has pledged an awful lot of public spending. I mean, the public finances have been, compromised, some might say. Certainly people like the IFS have suggested they will be, as a result of what this government is committed to in terms of infrastructure and NHS and other things.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, campaigning and governing are two very different things. And yes, of course, the Prime Minister in his campaign made a number of serious commitments to spend a lot more money in the future. I mean, it was almost like a contest to see who could open their wallets wider during the campaign. And yeah, business and the public and the Conservatives' new public, particularly in the north of England, is going to want to hold him to those commitments. I think that if there's to be an end to austerity and if the purse strings are to loosen, we probably won't know about that until we see the future of the relationship with the European Union.
Yeah, which is a strange turnaround, of course, because we've had a decade of austerity under a Conservative government. But now that the finances are sort of back on an even keel, I suppose, as it were, now, more spending potentially could arrive. But also stability. I take issue with that because of the SNP, the wins that they've had in Scotland. They've won 56 out of 59 seats. That's a clean sweep. That gives a lot of sort of leverage politically to Nicola Sturgeon to go for another independence referendum. Not talking about Brexit, I'm talking about the separation of Scotland from the rest of the United Kingdom. The government has said that they won't allow a referendum, but they'll be under pressure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I can't disagree with you on that. I mean, there is a certain degree of increased political stability in that we know that we have a ruling party with a substantial majority. What that has done, though, is you're absolutely right, it's set in motion a process in Scotland that will be a source of significant instability in the future. We don't know exactly when that will kick off or how that will kick off. There have been all kinds of predictions about the future of the Union in the wake of this victory. And yes, stability perhaps with regard to Brexit, stability perhaps within the Palace of Westminster. Beyond that, yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Great stuff. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Charles Hecker, Senior Partner and Political Expert at Control Risks. We'll be going back to Westminster throughout the programme, of course. We have plenty more guests outside the Palace of Westminster this morning to digest the Tory party win. But in the meantime, let's get over to Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans, who's got all the latest in global news. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Some big news from overnight. President Trump is said to have agreed to a Phase 1 trade deal with China. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
Sources say this cancels the introduction of a new round of tariffs that were scheduled for Sunday. U.S. negotiators have offered to cut existing tariff rates by up to 50% on some $360 billion of Chinese imports. In return, Beijing has committed to purchasing large quantities of farm products and to enhance the protection of intellectual property rights. Asian equities bounced and the yuan rose the most in a year. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Crossing over to Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel may be facing down a revolt from lawmakers over her China policy. That's according to draft legislation seen by Bloomberg News. Bloomberg's Patrick Donahue explains.
Bundestag legislators are pushing for restrictions that could effectively ban equipment supplier Huawei from Germany's new 5G networks. That's a serious challenge to Merkel's decision this year not to impose an overall ban on individual vendors. A ban in Germany could shift the debate over Huawei in Europe, where governments have tried to strike a balance between security and trade relations. In Berlin, Patrick Donahue, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
6 bodies have been recovered from New Zealand's White Island 4 days after tourists were engulfed in a volcanic eruption. 2 more victims are thought to be still on the island, but have yet to be found, and another operation will be launched to find them. The recovery operation was delayed due to fears of another eruption. Scientists warn that volcanic activity has increased and the island is highly volatile. And EU leaders have pledged to eliminate net carbon emissions by the middle of this century. It's a historic pledge that sets up a radical overhaul of the continent's economy. 26 nations gave an unqualified endorsement of the goal. Poland fudged slightly, endorsing the objective, but not committing to actually meet it. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So the Conservatives look set to win 365 out of 650 seats in the House of Commons. A decisive victory, a significant majority to get Boris Johnson's Brexit bill through. President Donald Trump says Britain and the US will now be free to strike a massive new trade deal after Brexit. The surge in the pound, though, is waning just a little this morning. We're up by 1.5% on cable, trading at one spot 3361. We had gained as much as 1.9% against the dollar. The FTSE 250, though, surges 4.4% right now. We've also seen the biggest gain there since 1986. A big relief rally for banks, utilities, home builders and retailers. Yields have also climbed in terms of 10-year gilt yields as the uncertainty around the political situation in the UK has faded. It's not just that, though, that has helped to boost global equities, and Euro Stoxx 600 equities up by 1.6%. It's also that President Donald Trump has signed off on a Phase 1 trade deal with China. The introduction of the new wave of US tariffs looks to be put off. That was looming on Sunday. US futures are gaining this morning, up by around 0.4% on the S&P 500. And we also see US yields reacting to that China trade news. We trade at 1.89% for US yields right now. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
Now it's 9:20 a.m. here in the City of London. It's time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion, and we're joined by opinion columnist Ferdinando Giuliano, who is joining us to discuss the EU's response to last night's general election results from Britain. So what do you think the results mean for the European left? I think this is quite an interesting point, Ferdinando, given that the Labour Party was beaten so resoundingly here.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think these are two different themes. The first one on the reaction from the European Union is that I think there is some relief, in a sense, on the outcome of this election. There will be a lot more clarity now about the direction which the UK will take in terms of Brexit, at least in the short term. We expect this Parliament to rally behind Boris Johnson's deal and this to be approved. Obviously, there are big questions over the next phase of the talks about the trade relationship, and that's going to be difficult. Second question is about the future of the European left. Jeremy Corbyn had a very left-wing platform for the Labour Party. That's the direction he wanted the party to be in, and voters have comprehensively rejected this platform. So I think this is going to be interesting for the European left as it wonders which direction it should take, whether it should be a social democratic one or a more socialist one.
Well, Ferdinando, that is absolutely fascinating.
It should take, whether it should be a social democratic one or a more socialist one.
Well, Ferdinando, that is absolutely fascinating because you've got these moves within Europe, troubles within the Social Democrats, of course, in Germany, troubles in Spain with the socialists, and the fear, perhaps, of growing populism and the effect of that. I mean, do you think a lot of European European politicians will try and reflect on this and perhaps say, well, actually, maybe the Boris Johnson brand, more populism, perhaps less than you'd see perhaps from Nigel Farage and people like that, is something that can be followed fruitfully?
Well, I think, there is one important point to make that, this election was about Brexit to a large extent. And obviously this is a peculiar situation which many European countries, actually all European countries, don't find themselves in. Yet, some would say, but certainly not at the moment. Keeping that aside, clearly, Boris Johnson has shown that you can actually lie repeatedly. You can, make promises and then renege on them and then, really turn around and promise something new. And people still believe in you, possibly because the alternative is so dire. So I think there is one element which is, straight talking and, keeping to your word doesn't really pay off in today's politics. But the second point is about the left. And, my view is that, this kind of quasi-socialist model which Corbyn has championed doesn't work.
Yeah, indeed. Look, the idea that Boris Johnson, is not truthful certainly was splashed on the front pages of many European newspapers. But then, there was also a lot of scepticism even around Jeremy Corbyn because, again, his view of Europe was also Eurosceptic, it seemed, to many.
Well, it wasn't clear. I mean, I think that was part of the problem that, this is the big question facing Britain at the moment, and Labour and Corbyn in particular just didn't have a very satisfactory answer. They kept changing their mind, whereas, at least at the rhetorical level, Johnson had one clear, straight answer, which I think was part of the popularity in Britain, and I suspect to some extent also for Europeans at the moment. Europeans are utterly bored with Brexit. They just want it to be done, and, as much as the European as the British electorate, it would seem. So I think, at the very least, it seems like we have a clear answer today in the rest of Europe. Let's just move on to the next phase, because it's not going to be an easy one. The next trade negotiation, will involve big talk about what level playing field means, and it's going to be difficult. But at least I think Europe is relieved that we are getting closer.
Ferdinando, what about the personal issue on this? Because a lot of Europeans, I think, found Boris Johnson extremely difficult to deal with. This was, after all, a man who, in his journalistic beginnings, mainly spent his time annoying bureaucrats in Brussels. They see him as unserious and, as you say, sometimes perhaps even mendacious. Can they work with him at all?
Well, I think, that's absolutely right. At the beginning, it was infuriating what he did and all these kind of changes of position. Let's remember that he famously wrote 2 columns to decide, when he was going to announce whether it was going to be Remain or Leave. And in the end, he chose to publish the one in favor of Leave. But I think at the moment, everything has changed. People are very tired. And, he did show that he could negotiate a deal. Now he's shown that he can find a parliamentary majority for this deal. And I think the rest of Europe doesn't care very much at all about whether, what's he done in the past. They just want to get this deal signed and move on.
Okay. Bloomberg's opinion columnist Ferdinando Giuliano, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You can read Ferdinando's column and a lot more from Bloomberg Opinion just by typing in OPIN on the terminal. Much more to come live from London and the Palace of Westminster. That's coming up next. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Charlie Pellet. Comcast's Sky dominated German coverage of Europe's top club soccer competition for 2 decades. Now the streamers are taking over. Billionaire Len Blavatnik's DAZN and Amazon.com edged out Sky to secure exclusive rights to stream the Champions League to their German customers for 3 seasons from 2021. The result shows streaming platforms are stepping up the challenge to traditional pay TV companies that rely on prime sports coverage to retain customers. The Justice Department says 10 former NFL players have been charged with defrauding the league's health care benefit program. They include 5 former players on the Redskins. And it's the end of an era this weekend as the Raiders are set to play their final scheduled game in Oakland before moving to Las Vegas next season. They'll be hosting Jacksonville. And that's the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Charlie Pellet.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Witham offers private equity expertise to address the advisory, audit, and tax needs of your fund's portfolio companies.
Hi, I'm Bill Hageman, Witham's proud CEO. Witham's private equity specialists understand the unique challenges facing PE firms. We work hand in hand with sponsors and their portfolio companies to help maximize the value of their investments with our world-class advisory, audit, and tax solutions, and industry expertise in key growth sectors such as healthcare, manufacturing, and real estate.
Visit Witham.com/PE for more information.
Ah, Christmas, a time for sharing gifts and laughter, and photos and videos. Make the most of it with a SIM-only deal packed with data from Tesco Mobile. Like a 10-gig SIM for just £13 a month. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile today. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 29th of December. 12-month contract and unlocked 4G-enabled phone required. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night, and somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here, testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use, and the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
This One Nation Conservative government has been given a powerful new mandate. to get Brexit done?
I do believe that the pressure is off Boris to actually, get that deal done by 2020.
I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection on this result and on the policies that the party will take going forward.
Very few things are better for a currency than certainty.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, live from Westminster on Bloomberg Radio.
And it's 9:30am here in London. A very good morning. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Roger Hearing, live from a very blustery, cold and damp and muddy Westminster, bringing you the latest on an extraordinary overnight election. Caroline.
Indeed, the Conservatives winning 365 seats, it looks like, out of 650. So that decisive win for Boris Johnson's Conservatives has meant a surging pound, although we see some of that increase fade now that the results are really known. The pound up at the moment 1.7%, trading at $1.3389. We've also seen a jump in UK equities. So the FTSE 250 is up at the moment 4.4%. We've seen a big relief rally for banks, utilities, home builders, retailers, as that nationalisation agenda of the opposition Labour Party has been resoundingly rejected. But we also have another big story, which is President Donald Trump signing up to the US-China Phase 1 trade deal, although we don't have the details of it, expected later from Washington this Friday. The US Stock 600 gains by 1.6%. We also saw the All-Country World Index hit another record high. In terms of the FX markets this morning, we trade at 1.89, so we're fairly flat on US yields. German yields at negative 25 basis points, so up 2.5 basis points. UK gilt yields also seeing a surge, up 3 basis points at 85 basis points. So those are the markets, Roger.
Yeah, well, let's pick up on what's been happening overnight. As you say, a huge victory for the Conservatives. We now think they've got a 76 majority overall in the building just behind me, and that should spur on the move towards putting in place Boris Johnson's Brexit deal, which, of course, he wanted to do to take Britain out of the EU by January the 31st. I'm very pleased to say joining me here on some very trying conditions in terms of cold and wet in front of the Houses of Parliament is Tobias Ellwood, an MP, newly elected MP, I should say. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Bournemouth, and former, of course, Defence Minister as well. So, Tobias, first of all, this is something that is going to speed up Brexit. That's true now, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I mean, firstly, there's a scale of this event I'm not sure we've all come to terms with. To see us actually eat into Labour heartlands. I mean, Sedgefield, this is Tony Blair's old stomping ground. Bolsover, this is Dennis Skinner. Who'd have thought there'd be Conservative MPs representing this area? And I think that's what the nation wanted. They wanted clarity, purpose, a sense of direction. And as you point out, we also want to get Brexit done, and that's what will be on the agenda.
So what is the timetable? I mean, when are you going to be back in there voting?
Well, I actually don't know. I think it's been decided as we speak, but I understand things will happen this week to get the second reading through, or at least present the bill itself. But absolutely, the 31st of January is that deadline, which... well,
you've got a Christmas holiday in between. I mean,
we do,
the timetable is
we
pushing.
do indeed. But let's not forget that we've been around this carousel a number of times. The actual the protocol, the political declaration, and indeed the withdrawal agreement is there in principle. It passed second reading prior to this election. So we are ready to move forward at a pace.
Okay, and say that happens and January the 31st comes and Britain leaves, then you have the discussions about the trade bill, the trade deal between Britain and the EU going forward. Can that be done in 11 months?
People didn't think that Boris Johnson could go to Europe and come back with a fresh deal. So you're right to ask the question. But I am, I think, enthusiastic, and I think we're ambitious enough to say that, yes, we can do this.
Would there be an extension? Would there need to be an extension?
Well, lots of hypotheticals there.
Well, it's not totally hypothetical. It's about 4 or 5 months away.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is that, the big documents that have been written already that go into the detail of this are already there, ready to move forward. So it's a matter of now looking back at these things, saying what we're going to actually move forward. It's not like we're starting from scratch.
Yeah, but European officials were quoted last week saying it's simply impossible.
And they said it's simply impossible for us to renegotiate a trade deal that removed the backstop in Northern Ireland. It happened.
All right. But the hypothetical is important. If it isn't possible to do it in that time scale, would you personally support an extension?
I'm personally committed to making sure this happens in this next time.
So the answer is yes?
Well, what I'm trying to say is that we got into difficulties. Indeed, our party had divisions because people, I'm afraid, got lured into answering questions such as yourselves. You're right to say there is time pressure, but I'm actually convinced that we can actually do this because much of the work has already been done already.
There are lots of business people out there and investors who say we need to know more. The whole point about this election
Absolutely.
was certainty. You're still saying, well, we don't know.
And it's not that we don't know. I don't know because I'm not privy to that. Those conversations. But I absolutely hear what you say. The businesses in Bournemouth and in London as well, we want that certainty to move forward. In fact, it is the absence of clarity which is actually, whether going one way or another on Brexit, which has actually caused the impasse, the gridlock. We have a sense of direction. You have a Prime Minister that's absolutely committed. Of all things, getting Brexit done is the single phrase used most often in this election. So I think we're going to see progress on this.
All right, Tobias Elwood, thank you so much for being with us. Tobias Elwood there, the new MP, continuing MP for Bournemouth, talking with us here outside Westminster. And he's just told me that in there they're going to push this forward so that it moves towards the January the 31st date for the leaving. Yeah. And then maybe they will have to ask for an extension in the next 6 months to try and get the whole thing done. But he's not going into the hypotheticals with me, Caroline.
No, exactly. I mean, obviously, the idea is that given such a large majority in the House of Commons, that perhaps Boris Johnson would not be beholden to the more sort of hardline Brexit supporters, that, perhaps he wouldn't be under such pressure. But, Roger, the other thing that is interesting to me is not just the size of the victory, but also the turnout in this general election, which actually is slightly down on 2017. But unlike some of our guests saying, for example, Europe is bored of hearing about Brexit, in terms of the UK electorate and voters here, they did turn out to this poll, some almost 32 million voters.
They did. I think we're hearing 67.1, something like that percent, which sounds a lot in a way. But then you think, well, that's about 7 in 10 people. If you had 10 people, 3 of them didn't bother to turn out. And given quite how much passion there's been expended in this, perhaps that is a little surprising. On the other hand, a theme I kept hearing again and again was so many people in this election wanted to put none of the above, but they were prepared to accept one option purely as a way of moving forward. So I think probably this is an election that's going to be studied by political scientists for a long time to come. Maybe we'll know some of the answers to that.
Indeed, and we'll have much more from the Green, of course, because Bloomberg's David Merritt will be joining us also to chew over all of the results now that we have them in. In the meantime, let's get all the latest in global news headlines. It's not just the UK election, of course, this morning. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Good morning.
Caroline, good morning. The US and China have a Phase 1 trade deal. President Trump signed off on the pact, cancelling a new round of tariffs. Washington has also offered to cut existing tariffs by up to 50%. That is in return for Beijing making large farm purchases and beefing up intellectual property protection. The terms of the deal have been agreed, but the text hasn't been finalized. Staying in the US, the House Judiciary Committee is plowing ahead with articles of impeachment against President Trump. That's despite objections and amendments from Republican members of the panel. Yesterday, after 2 hours of heated debate, the committee's chairman delayed the final votes until today. Now to New Zealand. The military has retrieved 6 bodies from the offshore volcano that erupted early this week, even as scientists warned of another eruption. Bloomberg's Matthew Brockett reports.
The operation to retrieve bodies from White Island was conducted by members of the bomb disposal squad wearing specialist clothing and breathing equipment. 2 further bodies thought to still be on the island remain to be found. There were 47 people on the volcano when it erupted Monday in an explosion of scorching steam, gas and ash. Most sustained severe burns. 16 have died in Wellington. Matthew Brockett, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And crossing over to Europe, EU leaders have agreed to work towards climate neutrality by 2050, but they've left Poland out of the commitment. Well, that's for now. Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo has those details.
In a classic European fudge, EU leaders agreed to eliminate net carbon emissions by 2050, but they could not all agree on the timeline to implement it, with one member state, Poland, saying it endorses a plan known as the European Green Deal, but is not fully ready to commit to the target. In Brussels, Maria Tadeo, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Roger Hearing is still outside of Parliament as we look at the reaction to Boris Johnson's decisive win over the Labour Party. Roger, stocks are soaring on the result of this, and the pound too. Joe Swinton of the Liberal Democrats has resigned. The Labour Party leader has not yet. He says he's going to go, but no detail.
Yeah, he hasn't resigned. He said he's going to hang around for the transition, whatever that may be. But I think a lot of Labour MPs and ex-MPs would like him to go right now.
Indeed. This, of course, as we have now more certainty around Brexit. Well, the UK will be leaving the European Union on the 31st of January, but still a lot up in the air when it comes to the EU-UK trade deal. We only have 11 months to negotiate that. Currently, the FTSE 100 up by 1.6%. FTSE 250 soars 4.4%. The pound trades at 1.34 against the US dollar, stronger 1.8%. This is Bloomberg.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
In the world of financial advice, speed, clarity, and foresight aren't just nice to have, they're required to survive. Adipar provides advisors the real-time portfolio reporting and insights required to realize the goals and personal potential for their clients. Trusted by thousands of wealth advisors, from family offices, RIAs, and large financial institutions, Adipar helps you make better, more informed investment decisions. To learn more, visit us at addepar.com.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the...
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition. For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked breads to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
When it comes to music, I've heard it all. Pink Floyd, Sean Paul, Slipknot. But in the Witch Test Lab, hearing isn't enough. When we test headphones, we really listen. Not just to the music, but to the stuff that gets in the way. The traffic, the chatter, all that. Mind the gap. We simulate the loudest commute to find you the headphones that cancel out the noise. So you know we're only recommending the best.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Ah, Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
At TUI, we can help you find the perfect getaway for two. We fly to over 70 destinations worldwide, so wherever you have in mind, we'll help you get there. Book now and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. Book online or in store with one of our travel experts. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's and put you in the middle. Offer available on selected holidays for a limited time and subject to availability. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
Some days life can get in the way of catching up on the news that moves your world. TuneIn is here to help. With live 24/7 coverage from CNN wherever you go on the TuneIn app, you can always find a slice of your schedule, however long, to check in on the biggest stories of the day.
Hell hath no fury. The president's counselor went on a rampage on a taped phone call with Washington Examiner reporter.
Search CNN on TuneIn to get the live news when it matters most.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff. Hey NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Hey NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Use 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So, Boris Johnson's Conservatives win decisively as Labour strongholds fall here in the UK. The turnout reportedly over about 67% of voters. And as a result of that greater certainty, we have FTSE 100 shares up by 1.6%. The more domestically focused FTSE 250 soars 4.3% right now, had been even higher, gaining the most since 1986. That's Margaret Thatcher territory. This on relief rally for banks, utilities, home builders, retailers, all less worried now because the Labour agenda of possibly nationalising big companies, well, that's off the cards. In terms of the other big stories, though, President Donald Trump signing off on a phase one trade deal with China and therefore averting these US tariffs that were going to be brought in on Sunday. That's the other big news that is seen. The MSCI All-Country World Index hit an all-time high. So trade progress, we're expecting more from Washington later on Friday. US futures are higher this morning. I'll give you a check of those now. So Dow Jones futures gained 0.4%, as do the S&P 500 E-mini futures. Shares also in Asia jumped this morning. We also saw a reaction in the FX space. Really, these two big stories meaning some relief as we head into the end of the year. 1.89% for benchmark US yields. UK gilt yields at spot 85 basis points, so up 3 basis points. And German yields at negative 24 basis points, also higher 2.5 basis points. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Hong Kong police officers have racked up more than $120 million in overtime wages. That's as they work weekends and long hours to handle unprecedented pro-democracy protests. Roughly 11,000 officers were paid more than $122 million for extra shifts between June and November. That's according to a document posted on Facebook. ECB President Christine Lagarde struck a positive note in her central bank debut. She says the euro area economy's slowdown is showing signs of bottoming out. We've learned some policymakers wanted Lagarde to mention the risks of sub-zero rates, but the Governing Council decided the message might be overinterpreted That's by investors. And finally, the back-cracking traditional Thai massage has been added to a prestigious UNESCO heritage list. As part of the list, the massage will now be recognized as something to be preserved for future generations. Unlike conventional massages, Thai massages involve a lot of movement and typically sees people doing a series of different positions. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans, there with the world news. Now, coming up next, our colleagues in the United States are getting ready for Bloomberg Daybreak. I was in the voting booth yesterday, Nathan Hager. Very good morning to you, digesting all the results today. What's in your programme?
Well, we have event risk turning into event reward for markets this morning as we close out this extraordinary week, Caroline. We will have continuing team coverage from London to Brussels of the Conservatives' resounding victory in the UK election. Plus, word that President Trump has signed off on a phase one trade deal with China is adding to the market exuberance. We're going to have analysis of it all from Ben Emmons, head of global macro at Medley Global Advisors, as well as CMC Markets chief market analyst Michael Hewson. They'll both be with us on the show this morning. And impeachment drama goes on in Washington. The House Judiciary Committee put off its vote on charges against the president after hours of tense debate. That debate will continue today. Join Karen Moscow and me for all that coming up right here on Bloomberg Daybreak. Caroline.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Nathan. Bloomberg Daybreak is up next. And if you're listening on London DAB digital radio, you will hear Bloomberg Surveillance. In the meantime, let's get over to my co-host this hour, Bloomberg's Roger Hearing, who's on the green outside of Parliament. As Nathan was saying, it has been a resounding victory for the Conservatives. What did you make of the results?
Well, I have to say I was surprised. I put myself down, I think, for backing a Tory majority of about 35, and of course he's got about double that. So I think a lot of people were surprised, actually, at the scale of all this. But it has been a fascinating 24 hours, which has, I think, changed really the whole landscape of UK politics. I'm very pleased to say, joining us once again, you joined us at the very beginning of our show this morning, David Merritt, Senior Executive Editor at Bloomberg, is with me here down on the green, where the mud is getting rather thick, but we're managing to still stay standing up, which is a good thing. But David, what's your overall reaction now? What do you think has changed overnight?
Well, everything has changed, Roger. You know, we have now the most powerful Conservative Prime Minister since the heyday of Margaret Thatcher. He's now got a carte blanche to remake Britain as he sees fit over the coming years. Obviously, the first part of that is going to be getting the Brexit deal, his Brexit deal through Parliament. That is now a given. What we don't know is what the future relationship is going to be like, so we will learn more of that. He's got the rest of the year to hammer out a trade agreement. But in fact, maybe now, with this scale of this victory, a little bit longer than that, you know, because he can actually stare down the rebels in his own party who wanted to have a hard deadline. So, and maybe even tack Brexit a little bit further to the softer end if he so desires. We'll have to wait and see. But then aside from that, what is his bigger vision for Britain? He talked in the campaign about the end of austerity, turning on the spending tap. Is that going to happen as well? Is that really realistic considering the state of the public finances? And then the other side of this big seismic night, the complete destruction of Jeremy Corbyn's vision for the country, and his Labour Party really in tatters this morning. Levels not seen since before the Second World War.
1935.
1935. It is really could not have been a more resounding rejection by the British people. So how does Labour pick itself up from this? We know that Mr Corbyn is going to go. What sort of leader are they going to put in his place? Is he going to try and carry on that same brand of hard left socialism, or tack more to the centre ground, which of course is where Labour won 3 consecutive victories under Tony Blair?
Yeah, I think it's a really fascinating kind of result, isn't it? Especially when you think back 5 weeks ago, David, to the start of the election campaign, when a lot of people were thinking that this was going to be a very open race. Actually, it then boiled down really back to the traditional two-party horse race between Labour and Conservatives. It's also why I'm quite surprised that Jeremy Corbyn hasn't sort of resigned straight away, really. Joe Swinson of the Liberal Democrats has done so, but Corbyn saying that he will stand down. We don't know when, and also there doesn't seem to be a clear sort of second in command.
No, that's right. I mean, it's not really his style, is it, for a dramatic resignation? He likes to consult and prevaricate about things. That was his style about Brexit, of course, wasn't it? And he'll be keen, of course, for someone in his own mould to take over. We know there are a few people like that standing there. People like Rebecca Long-Bailey, for instance, is touted as one potential Corbynite successor. But, make no mistake about it, there's going to be an almighty fight now for the future of the Labour Party. What sort of Labour Party is viable as an opposition to this incredibly strong Conservative Party that we have now under Boris Johnson? And just going back to what you said about Jo Simpson, well, she didn't have much choice about stepping down. She lost her seat, yes, of course, dramatically to the SNP. And that is the other big story here. The Remain parties were not able to get their act together. And Jo Swinson, Liberal Democrats, who started this campaign bullish, didn't they? But Jo Swinson was talking about how being Prime Minister was in her sights. And it's almost, and it is laughable now, isn't it? She lost her seat and has resigned. Has there ever been a more dramatic fall from grace for a British politician?
Okay, what about the business agenda in all this? Because we can talk to people all morning and saying, where now does British business look at this and say, okay, we've got a certainty, finally we've got certainty about the future, or do they say, well, actually perhaps only temporary certainty because of what might happen with the trade?
Well, you've heard the stats from the market this morning, remarkable surges across the board, across different industries as well. And you can read into that lots of things. Yes, a bit more certainty on Brexit, but also, the thing that people were saying beforehand is they were more worried about a Corbyn administration than they were about Brexit, and that has been shredded overnight as well. So huge relief and certainty for business that huge swathes of British industry are not about to be nationalised. That, of course, is a great relief for investors and for companies. And of course, Brexit aside, the Conservative Party traditionally are the party of business. They do which are more amenable to corporations. So I think broadly people are expecting more of the same of that. Now with this Conservative Party who can do what they want without fear of losing any votes in this place behind me, you would expect there to be a slightly more pro-business agenda going forward.
Yes, although I, want to ask about that. Is Mr. Johnson actually business friendly, or as business friendly perhaps as past Conservative leaders have been?
Well, we're going to have to see what the real Mr. Johnson is here. I think, up until now, this has been about campaigning and electioneering, smashing Mr. Corbyn's Labour Party, and we've had a very simple message: get Brexit done. Let's find out now what the rest of his policies are, now that he's been liberated and empowered, of course, with this huge majority.
David, thank you very much indeed. David Merritt there with us live down here outside the Houses of Parliament, where the Union Jack is flying, and a whole new political landscape is beginning to emerge in the sunshine here. Caroline.
Roger, well, of course, our coverage live from Westminster doesn't end there. Join us on London DAB Digital Radio at 12 noon. We have a 1 hour special that we'll be bringing to you. But stay tuned also, because coming up next, our colleagues in the United States are getting ready for Bloomberg Daybreak, so you can hear that. And if you're listening on London DAB Digital Radio, it will be Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keane and Francine Lacroix. A long night of digesting the UK election result. We've had special programming all evening, and it does continue. This is Bloomberg.
You never know where life will take you, which is why the new BMW 3 Series Touring is perfect if you're all packed up for, or escaping to. It has extensive storage and an automatic tailgate, handy if your hands are full. And it even has an optional intelligent voice assistant to help you at every turn. The new BMW 3 Series Touring. Book your 24-hour test drive today. Test drive subject to status and availability. Participating retailers only.
From ESPN and the award-winning producers of The Sterling Affairs comes the latest season of 30 for 30 podcasts. 4 brand new stories of espionage.
He wanted this team to be the Barcelona of women's basketball.
Resilience.
I started to scream. I tried to get away.
Corruption.
It's the culture of win at all costs.
And rebirth.
How will we ever rebuild it?
30 for 30 Podcasts, Season 6. Listen in favorite 30 for 30 podcasts on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown. touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
World 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Friday, December 13th, 2019. Coming up this hour.
Christmas comes early for markets as two big risks get taken off the table.
The pound and European stocks surge after a decisive election win for Boris Johnson.
And word of a Phase 1 trade deal between the U.S. and China lifts risk assets around the world.
The House Judiciary Committee postpones a vote on articles of impeachment until this morning, and it looks like a government shutdown has been averted. I'm John Tucker. Those stories straight ahead.
I'm John Stashauer in sports. The Jets lost in Baltimore to Lamar Jackson and the Red Hot Ravens. Wins for the Rangers and Islanders.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by Stevens Institute of Technology, ranked highest in the New York metro area for online graduate business programs by U.S. News & World Report. A Stevens graduate finance degree will position you for what's next. Stevens.edu/finance.
Stocks around the world surging this morning. 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 14 points this morning. Dow futures up 138. NASDAQ futures up 46. The DAX in Germany is up 1.25%. So is the CAC in Paris, and the FTSE 100 is up 1.4%. Nikkei 225 in Japan to jump 2.6%, and so did the Hang Seng in Hong Kong. The 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 1.88%. The yield on the 2-year 1.63%. The euro at 1.1181 against the dollar. The yen at 109.65. Nathan.
Karen, some major stories to get to this morning. We begin with the UK election, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson has won an overwhelming majority.
This one nation Conservative government has been given a powerful new mandate.
Let's get the very latest on the results now with team coverage across Europe. For that, we begin live in London with Bloomberg Daybreak Europe anchor Roger Hearing outside Parliament. Roger, good morning.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. It's been a moment that will change the UK's future fundamentally. Boris Johnson's Brexit has become doable because he has a majority of 76 in the House of Commons. Britain is on course to leave the EU on January the 31st. The timescale of getting the trade deal with Brussels, however, is daunting. Just 11 months. Some say it's impossible. The Brexit story isn't over yet. Nathan.
So, Roger, what does this overwhelming win for the Conservatives mean for the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn?
Nathan, it's been a desperate night for Labour. The last time they had this few MPs was 1935. Jeremy Corbyn is seen by many as the problem, especially his handling of anti-Semitism. He hasn't resigned as yet, but he has said he will not lead the party into the next election, so the search for a successor and a saviour has begun. Live outside Parliament, I'm Roger Hearing, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Roger, thank you. Boris Johnson's decisive victory now gives investors some clarity on Brexit.
With this mandate and this majority, we will at last be able to do what?
And that clarity on Brexit is lifting assets across Europe from the pound to the euro and UK stocks. We continue our team coverage now with a Bloomberg Daybreak Europe anchor, Caroline Hepker, joining us live from London. Good morning, Caroline.
Very good morning, Karen and Nathan. So sterling soaring this morning, up by 1.94% against the US dollar, 1.5% higher against the euro. UK stocks on the FTSE 100 gained 1.4% this hour. The FTSE 250 gaining more than 4%. In fact, earlier we had been higher, more than 5% on the FTSE 250. So hitting a record high, the biggest gain since 1986. Bank stocks leading the gains. Transport names also gaining. Stagecoach up 13%. RBS, for example, higher 10% as the idea of a Labour-led government obviously ripped to shreds. Karen.
Caroline, what's next for Brexit now after this overwhelming victory for Boris Johnson and the Conservatives?
Well, the size of Mr Johnson's parliamentary majority basically gives the PM a free rein to get this withdrawal agreement bill passed to take Britain out of the EU in January. That has been welcomed by business leaders here in the UK, also in Germany, even when they didn't favour Brexit. But the next phase after that, the UK-EU trade deal, the future relationship, that's much less certain. The timetable is for that to take place in 11 months, but similar deals have taken years. But with such a big majority, Mr Johnson has far fewer people that he has to please. So some debate about whether that may actually yield a softer Brexit in the end. We shall see. Live in London, I'm Caroline Hepker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Caroline, thank you. Now, that Conservative victory is being welcomed by European leaders in Brussels who gain clarity now on the UK's exit from the EU. We continue our team coverage with Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo in Brussels.
This is good news for the Europeans. They wanted to see clarity, and one of the things we've always heard from officials is that they wanted to hear the UK speak with one voice. The government and the UK Parliament, they're now operating on the basis that the agreement will be approved. The United Kingdom will leave with a deal that is what the EU wanted and the move on to the trade negotiation. But the key here is clarity. They wanted that and they are getting that.
And the euro is strengthening this morning to 111.82 against the dollar.
Let's shift focus now from Brexit in Europe to trade between the U.S. and China. Risk assets around the world are surging after word that President Trump has signed off on a Phase 1 trade agreement with Beijing. Let's get details now from Bloomberg International Economics and Policy correspondent Michael McKee.
People familiar with the agreement say it includes a promise by the Chinese to buy more American agricultural goods, commitments to do more to stop intellectual property theft, and an agreement by both sides not to manipulate their currencies. The U.S. may reduce existing tariffs on about $360 billion worth of Chinese goods by as much as half. And the December 15th tariffs on electronics, clothing, toys, and other consumer products that President Trump has threatened will be postponed. The president has reportedly signed off on the deal, and it's likely to be announced on Friday. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Michael, thanks. Global stocks are surging on word of the deal, but there's still a lot of work ahead. Eric Robertson is head of global macro strategy at Standard Chartered.
To expect much progress beyond the Phase 1 deal will be a challenge for markets.
And futures are higher this morning. Taking a look at the trading day with S&P futures up 14 points, Dow futures up 129, and NASDAQ futures up 46. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, the yield 1.88%. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thanks very much. It is 5:07 on Wall Street. Impeachment debate heads into overtime. Let's get that and more of the global news from Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Nathan. Yeah, after 14 hours of bitter and heated debate, the House Judiciary Committee postponed the vote on articles of impeachment until this morning. Democratic Committee Chairman Jerrold Nadler.
It has been a long 2 days of consideration of these articles, and it is now very late at night. I want the members on both sides of the aisle to think about what has happened over these last 2 days and to search their consciences before we cast our final votes.
The hearing began Thursday with the reading of the two charges against the president, abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, and quickly turned to Republican complaints about the process. Republican James Sensenbrenner of Wisconsin.
What's happening here is there's an attempt to steal the 2016 election 3 years after the fact.
President Trump reacted in real time on Twitter, criticizing the way two Democrats characterized his phone call with the Ukrainian president. Looks like a government shutdown has been averted. Lawmakers for the House and Senate reached a bipartisan deal to fund the government before the December 20th spending deadline. That's according to Nita Lowey, the New York Democrat who chairs the House Appropriations Committee. President Trump isn't too keen on a debate. The New York Times reports Mr. Trump is discussing with his advisors the possibility of sitting out the general election debates in 2020 because of his misgivings about the commission that oversees them. The paper cites sources as saying Mr. Trump has told advisors that he does not trust the Commission on Presidential Debates, the nonprofit entity that sponsors the debates. College students in New York City on alert after Wednesday night's fatal stabbing of a young woman on the streets of Manhattan. Officials are investigating the attack that left 18-year-old Barnard College freshman Tessa Majors dead. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio.
The idea that a college freshman at Barnard was murdered in cold blood is absolutely not only painful to me as a parent, it's terrifying to think that that could happen anywhere.
There have been no arrests. Former NBA Commissioner David Stern suffered a sudden brain hemorrhage last night and underwent surgery. The 77-year-old Stern led the top professional basketball league for 30 years. The NBA didn't give any further details on Stern's condition or his prognosis. Global news 24 hours a day on here and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, John, thanks. Coming up to 5:10 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John's Stash Hour.
Nathan, the Jets went down to Baltimore having won 4 of their last 5 games, but the Ravens had won all of their previous 9, almost all in dominant fashion, and as expected, it was a Ravens rout.
Motion man to the near side, Ricard. Jackson roll out to the right. Jackson throws on the move. It's caught at the 5. Ingram goes upstairs, and he's into the end zone. Touchdown, Baltimore. Jackson to Ingram. Marvelous. 5 touchdowns on the day through the air for Lamar Jackson.
We've won the call. Baltimore down the Jets 42-21. Jackson now an almost certain NFL MVP. 33 touchdown passes, 21 in the last 6 games. 1 interception since October 6th. 1,100 rushing yards, most ever for a quarterback. The Ravens clinch the AFC North. The Giants practice. Daniel Jones limited with that high ankle sprain. Looks like Eli Manning will start Sunday at MetLife against Miami. At the baseball winter meetings ending in San Diego, a boast from the Mets GM Brody Van Wagenen.
We feel good. There was a lot talked about our lack of starting pitching depth over the course of the last couple of weeks. I think that story has changed. I think we're probably the deepest starting pitching rotation in baseball. We feel good about that. Gives us flexibility to do other things. It's a good position to be in. We have the ability to do wants now that many of our needs are filled.
Signed 2 pitchers in 2 days. First Michael Wacha, and then yesterday Rick Porcello from Boston, where he once won the Cy Young. Brett Gardner re-signed with the Yankees. It'll be his 13th season in pinstripes. Rangers with a third-period comeback to win 6-3 at San Jose. The hat trick for Artemi Panarin. The Islanders a 3-1 win at Florida. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
John, join us tonight on the Bloomberg Business of Sports show. We speak with Zion Armstrong, president of Adidas North America, about the company's resurgence in the U.S. That's tonight at 8 and tomorrow at 11 a.m. on Bloomberg Radio or anytime if you subscribe to Bloomberg Business of Sports as a podcast. Futures pointing higher this morning. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion or your race or because you have children or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Did you know BT's business broadband comes with an always connected guarantee?
Always connected? We can't guarantee that. Nobody can.
BT can?
No, it's impossible. What if a squirrel bites through your cable?
That's when the 4G backup kicks in.
4G backup?
Yup.
Well, squirrels can't bite through 4G.
Exactly.
BT Business Broadband with the always connected, squirrel-proof guarantee.
BT, beyond limits. Subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
This week at Tesco, whole beef roasting joints and whole legs of lamb are half price. That's a whole lot of halves off a whole lot of wholes. What a mouthful. Tesco, delivering Christmas for 100 years. Max 2 per customer, selected stores, excludes Express, ends 31st of December.
Hey, tune-in listeners, Steve Kornacki here from NBC News. I want to tell you about a podcast I'm hosting called Article 2, Inside Impeachment. It's dedicated to bringing you the latest developments on the impeachment inquiry into President Trump. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I talk to NBC News reporters who are closest to the story to break down what's new, what matters, and what it means for the 2020 election. Search and favorite Article 2, Inside Impeachment on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
From Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
President Trump is saying to have signed off the so-called Phase 1 trade deal. That's according to sources telling Bloomberg. But perhaps this is also avoiding the threat of new tariffs on Sunday. Joining us now is U.S. Chamber of Commerce Executive Vice President Myron Brilliant out of Washington, D.C. Myron, great to have you back. So what does this mean if we get the trade deal? And how important is it that the existing tariffs are also rolled back and not just avoiding the new tariffs on Sunday?
Look, we need a shot in the arm. We've had a big week on the trade front, real momentum with USMCA moving forward. Hopefully we'll get a vote in the House next week. But with the China uncertainty hanging over the economy, hanging over, frankly, the global economy, the fact that we're looking likely we're going to have a deal imminently, I think the deal could be signed soon. They're talking about the final touches as we speak. And I'm confident that the deal will be a movement in the right direction when it comes to removing some of the tariffs. It's much more than just suspending the tariffs that would have gone into effect December 15th. I think there will be a rollback on tariffs that are already in place. That's a good news for the American business community, for farmers, for consumers. But there's still more work ahead.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app. Or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are rising around the world, and news of the partial trade deal between the U.S. and China reverberates across global markets. The pound is leaping as pro-Brexit Prime Minister Boris Johnson's party won a resounding election victory in Britain. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 14 points this morning. Dow futures up 136 and NASDAQ futures up 46. The DAX in Germany is up 1.4%. 10-year Treasury, little change, yield 1.89%. Yield on the 2-year, 1.63%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1% or 57 cents at $59.75 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.25% or $3.40 at $14.75.70 an ounce. The euro, 1.1183 against the dollar. The British pound jumping against the dollar, up 1.9% at 1.3411 against the dollar, and the yen at 109.65. Today we are watching for the import price index out at 8:30 Wall Street time, along with retail sales figures for November. And Microsoft is up 0.4% this morning. It showed off its new game console, the Xbox Series X, for the first time, confirming the machine would go on sale in the 2020 holiday period. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's John Tucker with more on what's going on around the world. John, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Karen. After hours of bitter and heated debate, the House Judiciary Committee postponed vote of articles of impeachment until this morning. And lawmakers from the House and Senate have reached a bipartisan deal to fund the government before the December 20th spending deadline. And the New York Times reports President Trump is discussing with his advisors the possibility of sitting out the general election debates in 2020. And at Bloomberg Sports, the Jets fall to the Ravens 42-21 as Lamar Jackson throws 5 touchdown passes. In hockey, the Rangers and Islanders, they both win. The Bruins lose. Basketball, the Celtics fall to the 76ers. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
John, thank you. It is 5:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. On an extraordinary end of the week, we're joined by Ben Emmons, Managing Director of Global Macro Strategy at Medley Global Advisors. And it's interesting to think of how we've gotten here. It was just a couple of days ago that there was talk in the UK of potentially a hung parliament, and in the U.S. that we could see a phase one trade deal with China pushed back as far as after next year's election. Now, both those risks are off the table. Is that how you see it?
Good morning, Nathan. Thanks for having us. Yes, that's indeed the case. And it was yesterday the surprise, I guess, that, those two, what we call tail risks, right, that came together yesterday then turned into a really positive outcome. And, the dynamics in the background were suggesting that ultimately the hard Brexit would be avoided and we would get a trade deal with China, but there was uncertainty about when, and I think that was taken out yesterday. So the euphoria across markets is not just that the tail risk is off the table, but there's also now some form of recovery being priced in. Right? Both the Brexit and the trade war have been with us for 2 years, pressed down on a lot of economies globally. And you can see now that response in markets, right? Like, so the UK or in Asia, those markets are up, 1 to 2%, whereas the S&P yesterday finished up less than 1%. And I think this is what the markets will be discounting. Phase one completion and Brexit off the table leads to global recovery.
So how do you see this pricing in playing out? How much further upside do you see for this market?
So I'm pretty constructive for that reason, because it's interesting how this trade war crisis, if you call it that way, has played out similarly as what we went through a number of years ago with the energy crisis or in the European debt crisis, right? In general, what you get is when you have a period of very intense flight to safety, that's when the value actually is created. So we saw it this summer too, like markets where the trade war was really affecting sentiment and investment were hit pretty hard, and we're lagging the U.S. markets quite a bit, and we're talking about European and Asian markets in particular. So I think this is where the opportunity is. It's like a gap between the S&P valuation and the rest of the world. That gap will be narrowed into next year. I think that's the upside. So, markets like UK or Korea or Germany and Taiwan and so forth, those will all be gaining relative to U.S. markets. I think that's the big trade for next year.
So you see those markets outperforming the U.S. next year?
I think there's definitely a relative outperformance. Yes, that the S&P could still gain because in a year where there's no or little central bank response to be expected, in the U.S. economy that's continued to be on good footing, and obviously the resolve of the trade war will help the U.S. economy. The U.S. markets will continue to put in performance. But the opportunity is obviously globally there. If this trade war really phases away and leads to a recovery of global trade, then I would say that the markets I mentioned are in favor, and capital will flow to those markets, and that will lead to the gains, relative to the S&Ps. Right? Yes, I think there's a relative opportunity in Asian and European markets to the U.S.
There's still a lingering question, though, isn't there, as to what a phase 2 or a phase 3 looks like between the U.S. and China? Does that present a potential headwind as far as those two major economies?
So, to an extent, perhaps, but I think that what markets will look for now is to say that as phase 1 is completed, that what really is important are two things. One, there's no more escalation of the trade war, at least not with China. The tariffs have been put in place. There will be a schedule probably presented by next year where slowly those tariffs start to roll off. They will not completely disappear, and the tariff has become a very effective policy tool for Trump, so he could use it again. And I think where the risk perhaps is that as the sequence of the trade war played out with USMCA completed and then he went after China and now China completed, we could go to Europe and start also there a new sort of tension with threatening of tariffs, right? So that is still a risk out there that could affect markets. But when you think about the trade war in itself with China, the Phase 2 agreement is much more about structural issues. So what matters to markets is more that there's no more escalation. I think yesterday that was a decisive moment that markets have said there is no more escalation from here.
Ben Emmons, always good to have you on. Thanks for being with us. Ben Emmons is Managing Director of Global Macro Strategy at Medley Global Advisors. Want to invite you to tune in this morning for a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance. Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow are live from Parliament for special UK election coverage. Stay tuned for that beginning at 7 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and television. Futures pointing to a higher open on Wall Street. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Suddenly worries about a global recession, another wave of tariff hikes between the world's two biggest economies, and a messy UK breakup with the EU are fading from view. Stocks are higher around the world on news of a partial U.S.-China trade deal and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's party winning a resounding election victory in Britain, giving him the mandate he needs to pull the UK out of the European Union in less than 2 months. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ both hit record highs on Wall Street yesterday as news of the Phase 1 trade deal between the U.S. and China trickled out. The Dow was up 221 points, the S&P rose 27, the NASDAQ jumped 63. More details of the trade deal are expected today. Dow futures right now up 132 points, or 0.5%. NASDAQ futures ahead 45, and the S&P 500 futures are up 14 points. Crude oil just below $60 a barrel. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Can you think of a better use for the time you spend keying in your business accounts? Good. Because smarter bookkeeping from Sage reduces that time dramatically, simply by taking care of repetitive tasks. It's helpful ideas like these that make us the UK's #1 for managing finance, operations, and people. Trusted by over 1 million businesses nationwide. Find out more at sage.com/automate.
Christmas, a time for celebrating, unwrapping, and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Christmas, a time for celebrating, unwrapping, and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade. Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He tucks it
hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, hit a shot, faced off!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Stocks around the world surging as two big risks are taken off the table. First, in the U.K., Prime Minister Boris Johnson has scored an overwhelming election win.
This one nation Conservative government has been given a powerful new mandate.
Johnson's Conservatives won their biggest majority in more than 3 decades, putting Britain on course to exit the EU by the end of January. Here with details is Bloomberg's Nehra Chehich from 10 Downing Street in London.
So it's really a resounding majority, the best result for the Conservatives, in fact, since Margaret Thatcher in 1987. And what it does is now allow Boris Johnson to get Brexit done, to deliver the Brexit deal that he's been looking for. The question, though, is what that exactly will look like as we head into 2020.
The overwhelming victory has the pound stronger by nearly 2%. It's currently at 1.3399 against the dollar. Equities across Europe are surging with the stock 600 hitting a record high. Elizabeth Martins is senior economist at HSBC.
There should be a pickup in business investment. I mean, where the UK stands out relative to, other developed markets is we've had no growth in business investment for 3 years. So you have to think there is some scope for catch up there.
Bank and utility stocks are leading gains in Britain, while UK bond yields hit their highest level since June.
Let's shift focus now to trade between the U.S. and China. Risk assets around the world are surging after word that President Trump has signed off on a Phase 1 trade agreement with Beijing. Let's get details now from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis in Hong Kong.
Sources say this cancels the introduction of a new round of tariffs that were scheduled for Sunday. U.S. negotiators have offered to cut existing tariff rates by up to 50% on some $360 billion of Chinese imports. In return, Beijing has committed to purchasing large quantities of farm products and to enhance the protection of intellectual property rights. Asian equities bounced and the yuan rose the most in a year. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thank you. And word of that deal has investors breathing a sigh of relief. Myron Brilliant is head of international affairs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
You don't get to phase 2 and 3 unless you get the phase 1 done. So it's important that we build momentum from here, but we should not wait.
And we're still waiting for official announcement of an agreement. And S&P futures are higher, up 16.5 points. Dow futures up 158 and NASDAQ futures up 56. The 10-year Treasury down 1/32, the yield 1.89%, and the yield on the 2-year at 1.64%. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:33 on Wall Street, and John Tucker has more on the latest surrounding the impeachment debate and the rest of the world's news. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Nathan. Yeah, the House Judiciary Committee abruptly delayed action on a historic vote to approve articles of impeachment against President Trump. Chairman Gerald Nadler postponed voting until this morning.
I will move to divide the question so that each of us may have the opportunity to cast up or down votes on each of the articles of impeachment, and to let history be our judge. The committee is in recess.
Chairman. During the 14 hours of debate yesterday, Florida Republican Matt Gaetz challenged the members to show proof of what President Trump's intentions were during the July 25th conversation with Ukrainian President Zelensky.
There's been much said about motive this evening from my Democratic colleagues. They seek to opine as to the president's motives rather than looking at his own words reflecting in the transcript.
The Judiciary Committee reconvenes at 10 o'clock. Looks like a government shutdown has been averted. Top Democratic and Republican lawmakers say they've reached a tentative agreement on a federal government spending, giving Congress and the White House about a week to approve the particulars before funding runs out after December 20th. President Trump and House Republicans haven't yet signed off on the accord, but the president likes what he sees. That's according to a senior administration official. That deadly attack in Jersey City, New Jersey, now being considered an act of domestic terrorism. That's according to New Jersey's Attorney General Guwar Grewal.
We believe that the suspects held views that reflected hatred of the Jewish people, as well as a hatred of law enforcement.
6 were killed, including a police officer and the 2 gunmen. Authorities say they recovered 5 firearms from the scene, 4 inside the kosher supermarket and 1 from a U-Haul parked outside. Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren wants to install dovish policymakers at the U.S. Central Bank if she wins in November. The Massachusetts senator's comments echo those of President Trump, who criticized the central bank for raising interest rates in 2018 despite low inflation. And former NBA Commissioner David Stern suffered a sudden brain hemorrhage last night and underwent surgery. The NBA didn't give any further details on Stern's condition or his prognosis. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thank you, John. It's 5:35 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update with John Stashower.
Nathan, looks like the AFC's road to the Super Bowl is going to go through Baltimore. The Ravens routed the Jets 42-21. They've won 10 games in a row, 6 of those wins by at least 2 touchdowns. The Jets could not stop them. 6 Baltimore TDs, 5 were Lamar Jackson passes, and he broke Michael Vick's record for most rushing yards by a QB.
It's pretty cool. My favorite player growing up, but it's amazing, and I'm going to cherish that forever. And you just got to keep it going. Right? You know, records meant to be broken, like he said. I heard him say that, and it's an honor for me to do it.
Ravens clinch the division, will almost certainly be the AFC's top seed for the Jets. The offense played well. Le'Veon Bell, his best game as a Jet. Jamison Crowder, 90 receiving yards. He caught 2 TD passes from Sam Darnold.
The run game was amazing tonight. Again, our offensive line, running backs, receivers, tight ends, and then the run game were awesome. I felt like we made our plays when they were there in the pass game as well. You know, there's just a couple throws I'd like to have back.
They dropped to 5-9, 2 games to go. Former NBA Commissioner David Stern is at Mount Sinai Hospital after suffering a brain hemorrhage at a Manhattan restaurant yesterday. The 77-year-old Stern had emergency surgery. He served as commissioner for 30 years. The Knicks continue their road trip tonight in Sacramento. The Rangers are out west. They won 6-3 at San Jose, scored 4 goals in a less than 9-minute span of the third period. Artemi Panarin scored 2 in 47 seconds. He had the hat trick. Mika Zibanejad scored twice. The Islanders won 3-1 at Florida. Yankees are bringing Brett Gardner back for a 13th season. The Mets signed another pitcher, New Jersey native Rick Porcello. For the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. It's 5:37 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now. It is the Bloomberg 50 issue, the 50 people who defined global business in 2019, including Ankiti Bose, founder of the business-to-business fashion startup Zalingo.
We provide a technology platform for mills, factories, literally as upstream as the farmers to interact with the brands that want products made by these people.
Read more about this and the rest of the Bloomberg 50 in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly weekdays at 2 p.m. Wall Street time here on Bloomberg Radio. It's 5:38 on Wall Street. Time now for the Tri-State Business Report with Bloomberg's Ed Corey. Good morning, Ed.
Hi, Nathan. New Jersey lawmakers held hearings Thursday on a plan to let voters decide next year whether to legalize recreational marijuana. They failed in March to advance legislation legalizing recreational cannabis, despite support from Democratic leaders, Democratic Governor Phil Murphy. New York's extending a temporary statewide ban on the sale of flavored electronic cigarettes, even though it is barred from enforcing it due to a court order. State Department of Health and the Health Planning Council voted Thursday to extend the ban another 90 days. The old one is set to expire on Sunday. Australian indigenous art has been seen in several of the best-known art galleries this year. The first major auction of that art in the United States takes place today. The Sydney Morning Herald says Sotheby's wants to capitalize on the surge of interest in indigenous art in the United States. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
Thank you, Ed. 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Steve Podoskan on KNX in Los Angeles. We're talking about AT&T turning on 5G in California's biggest cities.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and on WBBM in Chicago, I'm reporting that McDonald's has won a huge victory in a labor matter.
I'm Caroline Hepcon, Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on the Conservative landslide election win, the surprise constituency losses and reaction from party leaders.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting global automakers could face another huge airbag recall.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world, a morning in which a couple of key risks have been taken off the table, particularly when it comes to the UK election result, the Conservative resounding victory last night. Join us later this morning for a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance as Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow go live from Parliament for special UK election coverage, taking a look at the results and what they mean for Brexit and the future relationship between the UK and the European Union. That's all coming up starting at 7 a.m. right here on Bloomberg Radio and on Bloomberg Television. Ahead of that, S&P futures are higher by 16 points, Dow futures higher by 157, and NASDAQ futures gaining 53 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining